Welcome back to our Rise Prime Time, where we offer perspectives on the news and talking points of the day with me, Sulaiman Alede. Now, the president has had a whole lot on his plate. He says he's asked for the job, and Nigerians should not have mercy or pity in his words either. With many issues, from picking his cabinet members to assisting Nigerians after the removal of petroleum subsidies to avoiding a full-blown war with Niger, let's take a look at the state of the Nigerian nation. President Tinubu has sent 48 ministerial nominees for the Senate to confirm them as ministers. That's the highest in history. The cabinet members will form the president's cabinet and steer the country's affairs for the next 4 years. This is as the economy bites hard and Nigerians are asking for assistance with the ever-rising economy. They're also asking the president to cushion the effects, especially as it relates to the removal of subsidy as soon as possible. I'm joined live in the studio by Ajuri Ngelale, who's the special advisor to the president on media and publicity. Ajuri, good to see you and thanks for your time. I'd like to start by saying congratulations first. And as I say, just like the president, a lot of Nigerians will not be having pity even on you. But you started off by talking about communication reform, which is very striking and spot for many Nigerians. And speak to us on why the president decided to say this is the language I'll be, employing in speaking to Nigerians and even the press.
Thank you very much, Suleiman, for the opportunity, and good evening to all of our viewers. The starting point there is that in my first conversation, actually, with Mr. President, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he made it very clear to me how important it was to him that we have spokespeople, especially his principal spokesperson, is someone who is calm in the face of provocation and someone who will speak to fact in an age of misinformation. And he felt in his judgment that I was the person to fill that role. And the mandate that I now have as a result is to ensure that Nigerians understand, that we understand, that there has been an institutional problem, not just in the presidency, but across all agencies and branches of the federal government and state governments, where there's this tendency to do everything possible to quote unquote protect the principle. And in so doing, because that's the objective rather than serving the public, you end up in a situation where you find it right or defensible to attack Nigerians, to attack the people who even gave you the opportunity to serve in the first place. Because Nigerians hold the power key in this country. It's their vote that will determine who enters into any office in the country. So for us, we have said that we will be humble, we will listen, we will deal in our communication approach with mutual respect, but especially respect for Nigerians. And so we have made it a policy of zero tolerance on spokespeople who are online and offline on TV and radio, calling Nigerians names, speaking to Nigerians with a condescending tone of voice, and the general arrogant approach that you are lucky to hear from me because I'm on high and you're down. No, we're not tolerating that anymore. We believe that we're not more important than Nigerians, and we believe that Nigerians want respectful engagement with those who have been entrusted with power, and we are determined to give that to them.
Well, I think spot on. But now that we're talking about Nigerians, I really have lost count how many times you refer to Nigerians. If this is about Nigerians, let's get into the issue of subsidy removal, which the NLC and the federal government have been speaking of way forward. Now, speak to us on, first again, give us an update on where this is at the moment. Many Nigerians are waiting to know pretty much more from the government side and not the Labour side.
So it's a situation where you first acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of pain out there. People are hurting, people are crying, people in many cases are in misery right now. We understand that food prices have gone up, that energy prices have gone up, fuel prices have gone up. Wages have stagnated, and obviously the currency has been devalued with our reunification of the foreign exchange rates, which most agree is the right approach, but we also agree that there is short-term pain for the long-term gain. So the question now is about, now that we all agree that Nigerians are in pain, how do we rectify and alleviate that pain as much as possible, as fastly as possible, as quickly as possible? And what the president has done is, and I think you'd probably have to go back a long way to find a president that has been more vocal and more engaged with the citizens through a process than what we're seeing from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. But in his recent remarks, he laid out his measures in a very empathetic tone, in quite some detail. And I want to just go through those very briefly. Recognizing first that we have essentially an energy affordability crisis on our hands. The president has announced the investment of 100 billion naira, money is already available, for the purchase of 3,000 CNG fueled buses. These will be 20-seater buses that will be brought in, that will effectively ensure that CNG at a cost of 139 naira per liter, as against 617 naira per liter, is essentially a 4 times division or reduction of the end user's cost. So if you're, just in practical terms for our viewer, if you're paying 300 naira to get somewhere on a PMS fueled bus right now at 617, and you're taking a CNG fueled bus to get to the same destination, instead of 300, you're now looking at 65, 70 naira. It's a big difference for families, especially when you're taking these routes daily. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you have to now deal with the food crisis. The fact that, yes, there's availability of food security, and we do have to thank in large part President Muhammadu Buhari for this, the agricultural drive to enhance farming output across the country so that we can feed ourselves. Now, in a moment like this, we can really appreciate the work that had been done, but that's a separate story. What we have to do now is we have to oversupply the market as quickly as possible with food. And so the president has directed the immediate release of 200,000 metric tons of grains from our strategic grain reserves to ensure that oversupply gets out very quickly, and hopefully crashing the cost of these commodities like bread and many others as quickly as possible. Then in addition to that, the president directed 225,000 metric tons of release of fertilizer, seedlings, and other agricultural supplements for our farmers nationwide to bolster their output, their productivity, so that while we're depleting our strategic grain reserves in the immediate term, we're immediately operationalizing kind of our farmers to be able to enhance their output, to not only refill the reserves, but also even add more surplus to the markets to further crash the food price. Then the third leg of this, very quickly, is MSME capitalization. His Excellency, Mr. President, put in place for all segments, all business classes. So with large industries, he put in place what we call the 75 for 75. 75 billion naira for 75 large industries across all states of the Federation, approximately 2 per state. And the way it's going to work is we're going to identify strategic industries, businesses within those industries, where we will invest 1 billion naira to help that business expand its operations, hire more workers, but more importantly, create a boost in value, so that when you have this new capital in these companies, they're purchasing more inputs, meaning that you have more money in the hands of vendors, more money in the hands of suppliers in our informal economic sector. So that's the last point I want to make on MSMEs. You have the 75 or 75 for large, then now the focus on micro and small enterprises. We have set aside 175 billion, for 50 billion for grants, which is money that they will small businesses will never have to pay back. It's just grants. Then 125 billion low interest, single digit interest rate loans that will be repayable over a 4-year period. So we're really looking at putting money in the hands of businesses, dealing with the food crisis, dealing with the energy crisis, and the final leg is dealing with the minimum wage, because salaries have stagnated.
And it seemed the president missed out on one thing. If you look at that address, he didn't say anything about electricity.
Oh, but he said a lot about electricity today. there may have been a reason for that. Today was a very important day. I'm sure it's in Arise News tonight that Mr. President commissioned broke ground on the new 350 megawatt Gwagwalada independent power plant run on gas. But it's not just an IPP. This is something that had been envisaged even from the Buhari administration. It's part of the Ajaokuta to Kaduna to Kano gas pipeline. Effectively, the plan was to build 3 major power plants along the corridor of the pipeline. So there's no question of how are we going to get gas to supply the plant to produce the power. Now you're building these plants along the corridor of the pipeline. So the Abuja plant is in Gwagwalada, which we broke ground on today. It's a 3-year completion timeline, so it will be done within the first term of this administration. And then that's phase 1 of that. When it's done, the Abuja plant will have 1,350 megawatts, the Kaduna plant will have 1,350 megawatts, and the Kano plant will have 1,350 megawatts. All put together, you're looking at over 4,000 megawatts of new power along the AKK alone. So that was a major part of what happened today, but that's not the low-hanging fruit. Yeah. The question Nigerians have on the power issue is what can you do immediately for us?
Absolutely.
Which is why we are investing massively right now in rectifying our distribution problems. We know that we have 12,000 megawatts worth of power generation capacity in the country. We know that we can produce 8,000 megawatts today, which we've been supplying to Niger and other countries as well on our border, because we haven't had a way of evacuating it through an effective distribution system into the homes and businesses of Nigerians. So homes and businesses of our people are only getting 5,000 at max when they should be getting 8,000. So the low-hanging fruit is, and Malam Nasir El-Rufai touched this, who may be the next Minister of Power, he was really emphasizing on the fact that we have this low-hanging fruit of 3,000 megawatts that we can unlock into the homes and businesses of Nigerians within a very short period of time, within the next 9 to 12 months, if we make the right investments very quickly, if we have the urgency of purpose, and we have that. So I think that kind of deals with the electricity question.
Because it's very important when the president spoke about business, and he spoke about a whole lot about farmers, right, and the need for us to have food on the table. Leaving out electricity is very key here. But again, I still want to stay on electricity. Right. Is the government also looking at a review of what the DISCOs, the GENCOs, and the transmission company, which is 100% under the federal government?
Yeah, so now with the transmission company of Nigeria, you're 100% correct that it is 100% controlled by the federal government. Obviously, our DISCOs have been privatized. We have had to remove some DISCOs from the original owners, as you may recall. We've given that to new bidders through a due process, and we are happy to report that consistently from approximately 2018 to now, we have seen no stoppage of improvement in the level of remittance we are now seeing from the distribution companies in terms of cash they're collecting from customers that they're able to pay to the generation companies. Before now, for the, Nigerians who may not be aware, because of the flawed privatization of 2013, where we gave these assets to people who did not have the financial wherewithal and the competence to upgrade the assets, which has led us to this point. Basically, what we've done is what we had then was generation companies buying gas to produce power, but because distribution companies were under poor ownership that were not, investing in infrastructure, the power generated by the generation companies wasn't getting to the homes and businesses of Nigerians. So therefore, government had to step in through the NBET, the Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company, paying billions of dollars. We're talking almost over $1 billion a year from about 2014 to about 2019, 2020.
That's more like subsidy.
No, it was a pure electricity subsidy. People don't really understand how bad the situation was when President Buhari took over. We were paying over $1 billion a year in subsidy for electricity that people weren't even getting in their homes. We were effectively paying the generation companies to stay alive, because if we weren't paying them, they couldn't afford the gas to produce, meaning that the nation goes black. So we had to pay them to stay alive. Meanwhile, Nigerians weren't enjoying the power. What's happened since then, though, is that because we had reformed the payment collection system of the distribution companies, essentially threatening them that we will take away their ownership, which we ended up doing in some cases. What that has now allowed us to do is we've created a transparent system where all the money that distribution companies are paid by customers are paid into bank accounts that are monitored by the central bank, so they can no longer, the customers are paying into accounts that are under the CBN and under other federal institutions, so we can see exactly what customers are paying in. Before, customers were paying the discos directly, and we had no insight to what they were doing. Meanwhile, money was being siphoned off, and they weren't improving the infrastructure. So now the subsidy has gone from $1 billion a year at that time to now under $100 million a year because of the improvements. And very soon we would have fully exited that subsidy issue. So that's on the one end. So what the president is saying now is that we are going to invest massively with federal funds. We're going to co-invest with new partners in distribution infrastructure to ensure that we can get that stranded power into the homes and businesses of Nigerians. And it's important to be reminded that the president signed into law upon assuming office the amendment of the Constitution, which moved electricity power supply and production to the subnationals, which was before a federal exclusive. So that means now that the states can partner with private companies to develop their own generation facilities, their own transmission, their own distribution facilities, which is new. And we believe that that's going to be a game changer in terms of encouraging investment instead of the old system where you just had 11 distribution company owners monopolizing the sector and determining what happens. So that's going to bring immediate succor.
And, we need to also talk quickly here before we wrap up. The president spoke about fighting corruption, and he categorized that in the words when he said the elite of the elites, the very few who are strangulating the country. So how much, because a lot of people are saying, well, he's a politician, he's got a lot of friends. Do you think the government can actually start off by showing that it can deal with these known individuals as identified by the president in his speech to fight off such people holding down the country?
His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a man who believes that prevention is better than cure, and that the days of reactively dealing with corruption where you wait for the person to steal a whole bunch of money and amass the kind of wealth that would enable them to effectively have some influence over the judicial system to free themselves effectively, because that's what we've seen for a long time. If we're going to be very frank on this program, what we need to do now is to, yes, you deal with the reactive part of it, which is trying to recover assets, trying to put people in jail, even though we know the judicial system is an issue, even until today. The other part of this is going to be about creating institutional bulwarks and buffers that stop people from doing that in the first place. I think what Mr. President doesn't get enough credit for in Lagos is people don't really ask the question. Yes, they say, oh, well, revenues exploded under his leadership. Oh, infrastructure across Lagos improved and all these things. They say all of that, but they forget that the foundation of all of that was his ability to shut down all of the loopholes within the system that had created a situation in which by 1999, the Lagos state government 50% of the entire payroll of the Lagos State Civil Service was made up of ghost workers, money going into the accounts of fat cats. He cut them out, and it was on the basis of those technological innovations that he brought, that the federal government eventually adopted later on, that he brought into the country in Lagos, that he was able to build the prosperous Lagos that people talk about today. So he's done it before, he's going to do it again. But prevention for us is the focus more than cure, even though we deal with the cure.
We're closing, and if we can do this in 40 seconds. They say the president is a listening president, and we know a lot of people across the country are complaining about some of the ministerial nominees. So what should we expect from the president?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that there is a screening process that involves the DSS and the EFCC. And to my knowledge, there is no ministerial nominee that has been convicted of any crime in the court of law to suggest that they are unfit or incompetent to hold public office. If that was the case, then I think there would be a question to raise. But if we're dealing with a media trial or perception needs to be reality in order for somebody to be barred from public office. And I believe that if we were fighting corruption on the basis of media trials, Nigerians wouldn't be happy with us. So I think that the same standard should apply with our public servants.
Ajuri Ngelale, many thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.